Welcome to Plain Talk, where we're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff. In a moment, going to be joined by Trista Keith. She is a member, or I guess I should say former member, of the nursing program faculty at Dickinson State University. Now, the reason why Trista reached out for me to come on, although in my defense, I was already looking for a guest to book because we did have Chancellor Mark Hagerott on to give one side of this, I don't know what we want to call it, situation, dispute, what have you. And now we're going to get the other side from Trista, so we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the program. I'm sure Chad and I will have more to say about the shifting political winds on the national level. I want to have a discussion about how the word coup being thrown around a lot right now, which I think is very interesting, but we'll talk about that later in the program. Trista, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
Before we get started, describe your role at Dickinson State so people kind of understand who we're talking to here.
So I was a former nursing faculty at Dickinson State. My official title was an assistant professor of nursing at Dickinson State. And I was with Dickinson State for 3 years. My first year was as an adjunct, and then these last 2 years as a full-time faculty member. And I teach at the BSN level, so I mostly teach fourth-year nursing students.
So, Trista, I will tell you, I was not guest hosting last Friday when Chancellor Hagerott was on, and frankly, after listening to it, I'm glad I wasn't, because I was frustrated with some of his insinuations throughout this process. I don't know how many times he said, "It's my understanding that," or something like didn't know the details, but was very opinionated on things. One of the things he talked about was the lack of students in the DSU nursing program. And basically he and President Easton said, it just doesn't make financial sense to continue this way. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what's the status of the nursing program at Dickinson State? I think it said 16 graduates. Is that a fair number? Can you talk a little bit about the number of students in that program?
Sure, absolutely. I just first start off by saying that, after I listened to that podcast as well, and I tend to be reactive sometimes. So after I listened to it, I immediately, Rob, found your information and wanted to give you the other side of the story, because I always say that no matter what stance you're on, you should always look at both sides of the story. And I was disappointed that somebody in the leadership of that position wouldn't take the efforts to hear the other side of the story. Like, I have never talked to the chancellor, never, had the consideration to get the other side of the story. So I felt it was important that one of us faculty, get our side of the story and just really correct in some of those inaccuracies that just are completely not true. So back to the nursing program. Yeah, there were 16 graduates this spring from our BSN, so RN graduates that graduated from the nursing program. That doesn't take into consideration our LPN graduates that we have as well. And, our LPN class this spring was also small. There were only 13 LPN graduates, but it's completely unfair and unrealistic not to take COVID into consideration. This graduating class from this spring was that COVID class. They started in August of 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. COVID did no favors for anybody, any program, higher education in general, but nursing really got the brunt of that. It was not a positive light for nurses, and nobody wanted to become a nurse. So again, to not take into consideration the impact that COVID had on us was unfair. And we had 60 graduates coming into our program this fall. So that's
60 graduates, 60 enrolled, 60 students.
Yeah, 60 students coming into the program this fall. And that is, from my understanding, one of the highest incoming classes that we've had. So we're seeing that uptake from COVID. We're seeing those numbers. And with those 60 coming in, we still have a wait list beyond those 60, which is the first year we've had a wait list in several years.
Well, that's good to hear, because one of my immediate concerns, when disputes like this come up in higher education, my thought immediately goes to, our universities are not a jobs program. They don't exist to employ people like you. They exist to serve students, and by serving the students, the needs of the state of North Dakota. So I don't really care about, who's going to have a job, who's not going to have a job. I care that we're hiring qualified faculty to serve the students. And so I'm glad to hear, because I was very, very concerned, and this is from the President Easton. And by the way, for people who haven't been following this, President Easton has resigned, but he's continuing to serve as the president of Dickinson State, I guess, until the State Board of Higher Education comes up with a transition plan. But this is what he wrote. He said, before the recent resignations, DSU had 7 full-time nursing faculty members. In our last graduating class 2 months ago, we produced 16 students eligible to take the registered nursing exam. The simple reality is that though we love DSU nursing and want it to survive, we cannot spend over $500,000 in compensation expenses for 16 registered nurses. That does not work financially. Now, your contention is that number's larger. One thing that Chancellor Hagerott said, though, was that this program, it has to be subsidized by revenues from other students attending DSU, essentially arguing this program is making the cost of attendance at DSU more expensive for these students. What's your response to that?
Well, nursing is an expensive program. It is. We have a higher calculation formula than other programs because it is more expensive. So we get more money, from my understanding, from state, like a different calculation, because nursing is an expensive program to have. I can't, speak to the $500,000 that it takes to run the program, but yeah, it is expensive program, but it's obviously much needed, and I don't know all of the financial things behind it.
Trista, one of the things that Chancellor Hagerott talked about was essentially that the nursing faculty did a labor action by waiting to the last second to not sign these contracts, almost insinuating that you guys have been sitting on these contracts for months. He kept talking about that there's negotiations taking place. That indicates to me the administration was meeting with you folks to try to figure out the details. And then went as far as saying you were offered the same contracts as you had last year and you refused to sign those things. Is that accurate, sort of how he portrayed this conversation happening at Dickinson State?
Yeah, that is clearly completely false. First of all, I have a document in front of me and I can read it from DSU administration. This was never a strategic ploy to wait until the end of this summer. We have way too much respect for our students that we would never do that. Instead, it was really a strategic ploy by the DSU administration to withhold our contracts. I did not get my contract until June 26th, and a couple of them June 27th. Well, many other faculty at DSU got them in May. So instead, DSU administration strategically withheld our contracts until the end of June.
And were there negotiations still going on? Was there communication between administration and you folks? And then were you offered the same contract that you had last year, and did you turn that down?
The nursing faculty have been raising concerns about some of these issues since January. To insinuate that we have had no conversation with the DSU administration is also completely false. Like, we have been raising our voices about this several times, and I don't think President Easton would dispute that at all. In fact, it got to the point where they just didn't want to hear it anymore. So when we got our contracts, we sent an email to DSU administration telling them our concerns with our contracts, that we are unable to sign them as they are because we cannot physically fulfill what they're asking of us. So we asked to sit down and meet with them. We got an email back. That was on July 1st that we sent that email. So we got our contracts that Thursday, Friday, weekend before. We sent an email that Monday, July 1st. The provost emailed back and said this credit production policy stands how it is for everybody. And basically that was it. So sent another email and to clarify, does that mean you're refusing to meet with us? And got nothing back from them. So they refused to meet with us and sit down and talk about our contracts.
Did you,
as they were.
But you did reject, because one of the contentions that Chancellor Hagerott said is that they went back and they offered you the contracts again that you had been working under. You did reject those?
No, that is also. So there is guidelines and rules and regulations that we need to follow per our accreditors. And one of those is that you have to have a nurse administrator first. So And that nurse administrator is responsible for the recruitment of faculty. So the first step was hiring back the nurse administrator. So they did offer a contract to our former nurse administrator. And in that email, she got draft contracts for the rest of us. So our nurse administrator was in the process of working with the DSU administration, specifically the vice president, trying to set up a meeting for all of us. Because in that contract that she got, there was this process. So the first step was to get the former nurse administrator to sign their contract. The second step was to have the nursing faculty sign their contract. And then the third step was mediation and negotiations. Well, we wanted to mediate and negotiate first with them. Like, even just like through this whole process, this entire last year, for whatever reason, there has been this mutual distrust between us administration. And, to go back even, like, there is so many layers to this. And to go back from everything through the last year, we wanted to mediate first. Can we create this unity, and can we come back and work as a team? So the nurse administrator had 48 hours to sign her contract, and she thought we were setting up a meeting to meet with all of us. And during that time, her 48 hours elapsed, and then that was considered a refusal of contract, and there has been nothing since then. And then we came out with the collaboration with Mayville State.
Talk to me a little bit about the accreditation thing, because I hear that get thrown around a lot in these higher ed debates. And we were talking about a school that not so long ago issued hundreds of phony diplomas and somehow managed to keep its accreditation. So sometimes when people throw accreditation around, I kind of shrug my shoulders, because I'm not really sure there's anything any of these programs can do. I mean, we had outright fraud at Dickinson State University, and they didn't lose their accreditation. How much of a concern is that really?
Well, so for nursing, the nursing program has two accreditors. So the North Dakota Board of Nursing, so our state accreditor, and then ASIN, which is our national accreditors. And it's really important to be in compliance with accreditation. Like, you don't want to graduate from a nursing program that is not accredited. There have been programs before that have had issues with accreditation, and essentially students that maybe ended up graduating from a nursing program that is not accredited, their education is basically null and void. They can maybe work within that state, but to go outside the state and get another nursing license, their education isn't looked at. So accreditation is very important for nursing.
Trista, the chancellor also insinuated this is 7 sort of disgruntled people, that everybody else at Dickinson State is fine, and that North Dakota should just be singing Kumbaya because somebody like Steve Easton chose to work here. Is this just... Is the issue just in the nursing department, or are there other faculty and staff at Dickinson State who had concerns about the changes that are being made there?
Yeah, there are several faculty that have had concerns, multiple, faculty that are concerned about the credit production policy. And that was President Easton's big stance, is that you're not the only faculty that have concerns about it. And our stance was, we are the only program that has clinicals that spend face-to-face 8 hours with our students every single week. Nursing is not a one-size-fits-all. And even with all the changes, there are multiple faculty that have had concerns. And, the chancellor also said that, all the other faculty are moving forward. And I can't speak to why they maybe didn't, but there are other faculty that haven't signed contracts as well.
Do you, I mean, we had a debate over the past year as well about tenure, and that debate, and really it was kind of a university system-wide debate about tenure, but it was being led by President Easton. How much did that impact this?
I don't think that impacted in this at all, really, from our perspective. That was never even talked about from our group's perspective. It was really all these other issues. I am not a I was not a tenure track position, and pretty much, any position that you'll see posted at DSU, I feel like within the last few years are all really non-tenure track. And so we do have tenure track faculty, but that was never really talked about among our group.
Trista, there was an insinuation that the 7 faculty in the nursing program basically didn't care about the students at Dickinson State, that, the 7 of you were trying to hold the whole university hostage, which, by the way, congratulations on the power that you hold. Not many faculty at a university hold that level of power. But what would you say if they say, well, Trista, you're not caring about the students that you're supposed to be teaching. You're just putting your heels in the sand because you want to make a little bit more money or not work as hard.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that anybody that, has respect for the nursing profession can understand that it was never that we were trying to work less hard. We were just trying to be acknowledged for the work that we were doing. We never asked for more money, anything like that. And again, this was not some strategic ploy at the end of the summer. Again, we have way too much respect for our students. And really, even though this looked like a unanimous decision by all the nursing faculty, we all independently decided for our own personal reasons. And that was not an easy decision because of how much we love our students. And, I just have to really praise our students through all of this. There was a meeting last week with the North Dakota Nurses Association where our students had a chance to talk, and just the amount of professionalism and poise that they held during that entire time was very heartwarming. It was, those are our students, and they are great students, and I know that they know that we have their best interest at heart. And, I had a former student reach out to me, and she's like, you guys truly practice what you preach, like advocacy. You can advocate for yourself as well. Like, I wouldn't expect anybody else to sign a contract that they could not fulfill. And so again, like, our students have, in this time of uncertainty, I hate that they're going through this, and I ultimately the end result is the best thing for them, and I hope them success in their future endeavors.
So what would a contract, I mean, you said you weren't asking for more money, so this wasn't really about compensation, you say, but what could the university have put on the table that you or your fellow nurses would have accepted?
So for me personally, it really all came down to this credit production policy, and that credit production policy was in my contract. And if I didn't fulfill it in my contract, it said, the ramifications would be potential non-renewal of contract next year or a decrease in compensation.
So explain what that is and why you felt you couldn't comply with it.
So I know the credit production policy is difficult for, I try to explain it to even family members, and it's really hard for, people on the outside to understand. Sometimes I'm living in it and I'm like, what is happening? But so the credit production policy is, say I'm teaching a 3-credit, like, didactic class, and there's 20 students in that class. So I would get 63 times 20, I would get 60 credit hours. This year was 320 that we needed within the year. So I would have 60 towards that amount. Well, with clinicals, if we have a 3-credit clinical, and there are multiple instructors teaching that, adjunct faculty, because, again, per some of our regulations, we are only allowed to have, for the North Dakota Board of Nursing, only allowed to have 8 students in that clinical section. So I can only take 8 students out to a clinical site every week. So if you have 20 students, you have to have multiple sections, because this person's going to take this 8 students, this person's going to take this 8 students. And even some of our facilities here in town only allow 6 students in a section. And that's, again, for safety reasons. So if there's a 3-credit clinical, I have to split that 3 ways, because I can only take 8, this person can only take 8, this person, then I'm only getting 1 credit for that clinical.
So can you just contrast that with, let's say, somebody who's teaching political science and they have 100 students in the class? I mean, so those 2 things would be treated equally?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So with those clinicals, we're spending the face-to-face time is 8 to 9 hours a week. So if I were to get 1 credit for that, essentially for the semester, 1 credit equals 15 hours, while we're spending that semester 120 hours, 8 hours a week. So how is it fair that you give me 15 hours when I'm spending 120 with the students? Yeah. 120 hours face to face, and we're taking care of lives. Like, this is, it's not, there is no other, discipline that spends those clinicals with their students face to face every single week.
Yeah, that does seem problematic, treating, not all these types of study are equivalent. So that seems fair. How does your contract stack up? Dickinson State is hardly the only place where the North Dakota University system employs nursing faculty. We have nursing programs all over the state. So is your program, what they were asking you to sign, is that different from what nursing faculty at other schools have signed?
Well, from my understanding, this credit production policy has not been implemented elsewhere. It's been insinuated, I think, that the chancellor said that this is what's going to be happening other places. And, all I can say to that is that I really hope that as sad and as I am that I had to lose my job, I really hope that maybe going forward, other institutions will take this into consideration and make some different calculations for the specifics of nursing.
So what does this mean for the nursing profession in North Dakota, right? I mean, we hear so often about the nursing shortage. Obviously, Dickinson State has a pretty big geographic footprint when it comes to Southwest North Dakota. What does this mean if Dickinson State isn't able to get this program going again in terms of producing the nurses we need to fill the jobs in the state?
Well, I really, first of all, hope it doesn't come to that. That would be, very, very sad for all of Western North Dakota and Eastern Montana as well. Like, Dickinson serves a wide area, and we need the program. We just do. And so I hope that with whatever happens, they are, institution, colleges, programs go through their ups and downs. So I really hope that, eventually this will just be something of the past, and the students will have the best education here in Western North Dakota.
Do you think this is the end of the nursing? I mean, because if you have Mayville coming in and doing, and I guess I'm not entirely understanding, and I should be clear, when we interviewed Chancellor Hagerott, the Mayville deal or I guess plan wasn't in place yet. But I mean, that's been kind of their solution is personnel from the Mayville program, I guess, are going to help. But Mayville's all the way on the other side of the state. So I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of remote learning or something going on there. But that doesn't seem sustainable for Dickinson long term. I mean, eventually they're going to have to figure this out. So is this the end of the nursing program in Dickinson, do you think?
I hope not. Again, you need nursing faculty and you need quality nursing faculty, right? And that's not easy to come by, and I will say that we had a really great group of nursing faculty there. Again, it's nurse education. Being a nurse educator is not for everybody. So they've had some ups and downs with their faculty, but we finally had a really solid group. And, the students, that is one thing that they will say, like, they loved their faculty and we loved them. And I hope that they can find, faculty moving forward, because that would be the ideal. Like, remote learning isn't for everybody, especially with nursing. You want to have that hands-on. Any conference that I tell you, you should only lecture for maybe 20 minutes and then do some hands-on activity within the classroom to help engage their learning. So, and remote learning just isn't for everybody. So
Trista, what now for the seven of you? I mean, is are folks going to go back into practice of being nurses, sticking around the communities, or people leaving the state? Sort of what now?
I think most of us are pretty rooted here right now. So I know that a couple of them have jobs, and that's a great thing about nursing. We have several jobs that we can fall back on. So again, I think that we're all kind of rooted here and plan on staying in the area and just finding other jobs.
Do you think we need some because this is one thing that comes up a lot too when we talk about these programs, is people say we have so many of our university or campuses are kind of offering the same thing. Do we need some consolidation? Because there is a cost benefit analysis to be done here. There's a cost to the taxpayers. Even more so, there's a cost to the students. I think we all have an interest in keeping those costs down while obviously also delivering a good product. I mean, do we need consolidation? Sometimes I really feel like, man, maybe we don't need a nursing school at every school in the state.
Well, as far as maybe consolidating like with those policies, and to kind of go back to that, like, also I'm not against this credit production policy, because like you said, and I understand that, President Easton being in that position, like, you have to make tough decisions. Those decisions are made for, reasons that most of us don't understand. And that's the brunt that he takes being in that position. So again, I'm not opposed to that. Like, whatever, needs to be done to help the institution be financially fiscal is understandable. What I am against is there not being consideration for the uniqueness of nursing. So I will be curious how that moves forward. And another thing to really note with that is that, how it works now for our credit hours is we get, for that 3 credit clinical, we get a ×3 multiplier. So if it's a 3-credit clinical, I get times 3, so 9 contact hours with my students. And that is a standard across the state of North Dakota, how their nursing program do that, those contact hours with the clinicals.
Yeah. So just going back really quick to the Hagerott interview, there was some really negative, like I interpreted a lot of what he said as being negative about the specific faculty at Dickinson State. As you said that you sort of got angry listening to it, but were your feelings hurt? Were you like just like the insinuations that you didn't care about your students, that you were doing this basically just to create leverage for yourself? How did that make you feel?
Absolutely. For somebody that is, supposed to be my chancellor as well, and that never got our side of the story and never even, tried to understand that was that was very disheartening, especially when, and I just tried to keep making up for it with the support that we've had from the community and our students, because ultimately it is the students that I care about, and their support has meant a lot, and the community as well. Their support has meant so much to us. So,
one thing in response to that, though, I mean, the acrimony has been kind of ugly on both sides. I was reading some social media posts, calling Chancellor Hagerott evil, calling, President Easton evil. I mean, and again, Chad and I spent a lot of time talking about how, in the political arena, how ugly this has gotten. It really felt, I mean, when I looked at some of the sources, frankly, from some of your fellow faculty too, I looked at that as like, this is not, even if you disagree with President Easton, that doesn't seem fair. Some of these things. So, I mean, can you respond to that? It just seems like it got really ugly on both sides really quickly.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part of the media being involved in that, right? Things are going to get twisted, things are going to get spun, then there's going to be, even after, how sad and angry I was listening to, the chancellor ultimately, disrespecting us blatantly when, and it was very inaccurate. Like, I still would never speak poorly about him and President Easton, obviously when the chancellor was on here, like, it was all how amazing he is. And he has done lots of great things for DSU, and his time there shouldn't be, made up for this situation. It is important to look at all the great things that he has done for DSU. But on the same token, there is some accountability for the situation at hand.
Well, Trista, I think we're going to stop it there. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
The cold cases you see at The Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At The Vault Podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, welcome back. I was so glad to have Trista on. I think she did an excellent job of explaining the nurse faculty side of this dispute. And I think the thing I'm really struggling with, Chad, is I'm seeing merits in arguments from both sides. On one hand, I understand, like, I don't understand why we wouldn't treat, I mean, the different types of faculty, their jobs are going to be different. Like somebody who's teaching engineering or nursing or something that may require more hands-on type instruction, more didactic instruction, as she put it, is going to be fundamentally different than somebody who's doing a lot of lectures in a classroom where you could pile 100 students into a room and deliver a lecture, and that's meaningful instruction, versus nurses who you really got to be in, hands-on in how you're handling patients and everything else. So I understand that argument. On the flip side, I also understand our DSU's need to make some tough financial decisions and to play some hardball and to keep costs down. So this is hard for me.
Yeah, but I think the first point is a really important one. This idea that you're just going to treat a history professor as lecturing at a history 101 class to 100 kids in a learning bowl is different than hands-on. You can't treat those 3 credits the exact same way for the professors. And I hope that DSU, if this is something that's going to go to other universities, they really think about that, and they think about that these classes are different. I don't think Chancellor Hagerott, with his interview with you and Corey on Friday, did anything to help this situation or calm down the situation. In fact, I think he inflamed the situation by attacking these 7 faculty members. The fact that, he basically said they're the ones screwing over these students. They're the ones doing, they did this. They got the contract on June 27th. It's not like he made it sound like they've been holding this thing
It's not even a month ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And kept insinuating that they were negotiating. But in fact, it seems to me that the efforts to have conversations with the provost and others were shot down. So I don't know how you negotiate when it's just, here's your contract, sign it, be gone.
Although, I think you're right on the contract. I think the timeline, she was talking about like over the past year. So there's a longer timeline in terms of the dispute. I don't know what DSU was doing with the contracts, maybe playing hardball. But it does seem at this point that the nursing faculty, for whatever reason, got their contracts maybe a month or so later than other faculty. And now we're here less than a month and they all end up resigning. And I don't know. It's tough. I agree with you, though. I think Chancellor Hagerott definitely poured some gas on this fire and didn't need to. I think and I don't even think he has to concede anything to the faculty. They just lay out the facts. Like, there's financial shortfalls here. We're having enrollment shortfalls at campuses across the state. We have to make hard decisions. Start there. Start there. Those are large, logical, factual arguments that have merit, and that's what you should stick to. Rather than, and the nurses are not necessarily wrong from their perspective. They're concerned about their ability to meet that credit. So, that's where you start. Both of these arguments have merit. If you want to keep the program, you have to find some way to meet in the middle. Or the path they're on, it seems like they're on a trajectory to just not have a nursing program at DSU.
And Trista told us after the interview that one of the things she wished would have taken place is a conversation with administration about, okay, here's the goals you've set. She said she's not opposed to this idea, but how can I reach that goal? How can you help me reach this goal? Because conceivably, to reach the goal, we're going to have to expand the size of these cohorts that she's talking about. It just seems like communication has not been good here, and I don't know who's to blame for it, but it just seems like there were games going on in terms of timing of contracts and trying to create leverage. Chancellor Hagerott said it's all the faculty's fault. I think there was probably some games being played by the administration as well. So I just don't think the chancellor coming on and talking down 7 nursing faculty does anybody any good, because I guarantee that there was people listening all over the state who work at our universities who did not love what they're hearing from Chancellor Hagerott and the way he talked about these folks.
And the thing is that there was a failure here. And I think there's probably enough blame to go around, because ultimately, again, the focus has got to be on serving the students. And then through serving the students, serving the taxpayers in North Dakota. That's it. That's why these universities exist. That's why the university system is one of the largest line items in our state budget. North Dakota, I think, we punch above our weight when it comes to spending on higher education. We really do. For a state where the tax base is as small as it is, although we have the benefit of some of our tax bases in the form of liquid gold underground, which facilitate. But really, even prior to the oil boom, when you looked at per capita spending on higher education, North Dakota's frequently been at the top of the list or near it. So I think what that shows is that North Dakotans have always really cared about education. We really do. I think it's a priority for us, but we want it to be managed prudently. And so if we get to a point where we're going to shut down a program that could have been run, that if Ms. Keith's argument is that, it's an in-demand program, they have a waiting list to get in. If that's all true, then we failed by allowing this to get to the point where it is. And everybody involved should probably reflect on that.
It's also like again, I think her point about if there's 60 people on a wait list to get into this program, this is a workforce development issue. We need these nurses, right? We spend a bunch of money running ads all over the country saying, come to North Dakota and spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on that. Wouldn't making this program work and spending the money on that be a more efficient way to create workforce than running ads all over the Midwest, which, I'm looking at when I've looked at the data in the past in terms of those they're not bringing a bunch of people into the state. So I think we can think about this as we need nurses. We need to figure out how to make this work. If there's 60 people on this list, figure it out because we need the nurses.
Can I make an ancillary point here?
Please.
In that it seems as though higher ed leadership never gets this tough on athletic programs. You ever notice that? And nobody wants to bring it up because it's a third rail, right?
Well, that's not exactly true, Rob. You remember the UND female hockey player team? They made that cut there.
Right. And it resulted in lawsuits and everything else. Right. And that's the exception that proves the rule, though. I look sometimes. We have assistant volleyball coaches that are making six figures a year. And it is obscene when you think about the struggle that we have to, the burden. And I don't want to say burden because, again, I believe in higher education. I'm glad we make these investments. But when you look at how much higher ed costs the taxpayers, and then even more so, when you look at how much it costs the students, and then you look at what we're spending on athletic programs. And I think even with the general public, there is more outrage over, because I think what Chancellor Hagerott was playing to was, he was kind of holding them out. Like he kept calling it a labor dispute. So he was making it sound like these are a bunch of unionized nurses, which I don't know.
Which they're not. I mean,
which I don't know. I don't know if that's.
Well, they're not collectively bargaining their contract. Right. There's 7 individuals for negotiating a contract.
I think there's an association or something involved, but you're right. No collective bargaining. So he's kind of holding them out. And like there's a big faction of the public that's going to buy into that. Like, oh, these greedy nurses. I mean, that's the play he's making, that these are greedy nurses or everything.
I don't think they like.
Probably not as much as the assistant volleyball coach. Right,
Amen.
which is the problem, or the assistant football coach at NDSU. I mean, when you look at the salaries that they're making, and the public, most of the public has no problem, and I think that is so central to nobody wants to talk about it, right? Because nobody wants to be the jerk. I know the hate that I get when I write about every time the Bison won a football program, football championship, I would write an article about how much that football championship cost the taxpayers.
Yeah.
Those are the priorities we have in higher ed. So we're getting tough with the nurses, even though we clearly need nurses, right? Every nursing home needs nurses, every hospital, every clinic, corporations need nurses. I mean, we need nurses everywhere. So we can play hardball with the nurses, but we have an open hand when it comes to the assistant football coaches or the head football coaches. Like, it's obscene and it's upside down priorities. And it drives me nuts. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but
I love it, Rob. I love it because you're absolutely right. And people at NDSU and UND would say, well, these programs are bringing students to North Dakota. I don't buy it.
Also, I think if we're bringing the sort of students who are choosing their course of study based on the football team,
they ain't staying.
Maybe we don't want those students. Maybe those students can go to Alabama or something like that. And I know that's hard to say because North Dakota desperately needs workers. And I know our institutions, some of them desperately need students when we look at what's happening with enrollment and stuff like that, which opens up a whole other third rail argument about, do we have too many institutions of higher education in North Dakota? I would say the answer to that is absolutely yes, it is. But also, they're mandated, most of them are mandated in the Constitution. So, I don't know what we do about that.
Everything you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, about priorities being mixed up. And this is, I'm glad you brought this up because this is a really good example of that, right? We're talking about the $500,000 to educate 16 nurses or whatever that is. I bet you and I could look through the state budget and find $500,000 appropriations for things that did far less than create 16 nurses in the state of North Dakota. We could look through higher ed institutions' budgets and look at things that do far less than create 16 nurses in Western North Dakota. Coaches, all those, yes. I mean, we love sports, right? We talk about baseball all the time on here.
That doesn't mean I love taxpayer subsidized stadiums or taxpayer subsidized collegiate athletics programs.
Right. All that is fair. With all that being said, go Fighting Hawks.
Okay, fair enough. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about what I want to talk about, because and it was funny because in the break I brought this up to you, this coup thing, and you actually hadn't heard it. But trust me, I maybe tapped into some feeds on social media and stuff that you're not seeing.
So I will tell you, Rob, I don't spend a lot of time on social media these days, so that's probably part of it.
I get them insofar as I get tons and tons of replies to my stuff that I post. I don't exactly spend a lot of time reading it, but it's out there. It's also out there. I mean, you look at, I have a column about it today where Trump advisor Stephen Miller kind of immediately after President Biden announced he wasn't running for re-election anymore, immediately came out and started making, the beginnings of this point that this was somehow an undemocratic thing. Here's what I'm going to quote Stephen Miller, and this is from an interview on Fox News a few days ago. He said they held a primary, they had ballots, they filled out circles. They went to the voting booth, they spent money on advertisements. They just woke up one morning and said, we are canceling our entire primary. We're getting rid of our candidate. And I think that's kind of where the coup thing has come from, where, Democrats chose Joe Biden, and now the Democratic elites are stepping in and getting rid of him, so it's a coup, and they're subverting the will of the voters, and all of this nonsense. And there's so many rebuttals to that. One is the enthusiasm that Democrats clearly have, from the top down to rank and file Democrats, that they clearly have for getting a new candidate. I think plenty of Democrats were ready for this. And I think criticism of Democrats for covering up what Joe Biden was, and not all Democrats, but certainly there were plenty who were around Joe Biden, including, by the way, Kamala Harris, who's going to have to answer some questions about that. But they covered something up there. So shame on them for that. But the idea that this was a coup is ridiculous.
Well, it's ridiculous also just from the very fundamental place that the Democratic Party is a private organization. Their rules say that they nominate their presidential candidate at their convention that takes place in 3 or 4 weeks from now. I do get a kick out of Stephen Miller, of all people, being concerned about coups when January 6th took place. And I think you said during the break, the only reason it wasn't successful is because they weren't very good at it.
Yeah. The only reason it was an attempted coup. The only reason it wasn't an actual coup is because they suck at it. And
they suck. Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, I want to talk about the enthusiasm around the Democratic. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. Every Democrat I talk to, nationally or in state, is so damn excited right now. They're so damn excited. And one of the reasons why you hear Republicans talking about coups and all these other things and, trying to file FEC reports so Kamala can't get Joe Biden's money, all those different things, they are scared. Because Kamala Harris is going to activate young people, suburban women, and African Americans in a way that Joe Biden couldn't. And so Democrats are fired up. They're raising money. They're knocking on the doors. They're doing all those other things. If you would have told me that the Democrats had the ability to sort of get their crap together to not make this complete disaster, when I would have said, no way, Democrats aren't capable of doing that. But this has been a flawless handoff between Biden dropping out and Kamala being the nominee. And I mean, she's going to start taking crap at some point, right? I mean, that's the way this works. But so far, holy cow, it changed everything.
And I think you have to give some credit to that debate performance for Joe Biden that just punched everybody in the face with, this is real. This isn't right-wing talking points and everything else. And again, that is something Democrats are going to have to offer for the amount of time. And by the way, some of the sycophants they have in the news media that spent a lot of time not, being absolutely credulous when it came to questions about Joe Biden's ability to continue doing his job, right? I mean, I was writing long before the debate saying he does not look good. And I would get blowback from liberal readers saying, "Oh, you're parroting Trump talking points and everything." Well, they were right.
Hell, you probably got blowback from me because I was one of those Democrats.
I wasn't going to mention it, but yes.
Yeah. But I was one of the Democrats that watched that debate and was like, holy crap, what happened here? It's pretty crazy. But again, I think I don't know how quickly he went downhill, right? I mean, we don't know that. I do know that it can happen fast. And, some of the clips of him, even when he was getting on the plane to go home after Vegas, when he got diagnosed with COVID, him going up the steps was hard to watch. And he does deserve a lot of credit for getting here. I mean, do I wish he would have got here 3 weeks earlier or 6 months earlier or a year earlier? Yes. But he did eventually do the right thing by dropping out of this race.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the blowback from Republicans we're hearing right now is that I think the fact that this isn't good for them. I think they would have rather Joe Biden had stayed in the race. Joe Biden was on a trajectory to lose. There's just no question about it.
And I've talked to Democrats who are like basically saying, even if Kamala loses, at least we have something to fight for and be excited about. I mean,
and I think it helps the down ballot races too.
Right. Yeah. Again, I go back to, we're not talking about a huge amount of votes here. She increases suburban women votes around Roe by a couple, 2-3 points. Does the same thing with getting out African Americans and young people. Now, I think I saw a survey that 88% of Democrats were happy that Joe Biden dropped out of this. That's you don't get that sort of.
It was a coup, Chad. It was a coup. Don't listen to that 88% of Democrats. It was a coup, and it was the Democratic Party elite coming in to subvert the will of rank and file Democrats.
Yeah, I'm not hearing that. When I thought Chairman Adam Goldman earlier this week.
Monday. We don't usually do a Monday show, so that's
yeah. But I mean, him basically saying that anybody could run, right? After Biden dropped out, anybody could have run.
Well, that's the other thing too. Running for office is a voluntary thing,
right?
So if the person who is running for office doesn't want to do it anymore, they're allowed to make that decision, and it's not a coup.
And maybe compliment Kamala Harris for her ability to make sure nobody else ran. I mean, it was a great handoff.
I was going back and forth with somebody, and again, I don't normally engage a lot with people who respond, but I was going back and forth with somebody on Twitter, and it was like he was the one, he was kind of saying that, oh, it's a coup, it's, whatever. And I was like, your argument seems to be that he's not a good candidate, he's not capable of being president anymore because of his age and infirmity, but also he should have stayed in the race.
Right.
Like, no, whatever we want to say about the timeline, it should have happened earlier. Democrats covered some things up for too long. Whatever you want to say about all that, the fact is, and I think there's bipartisan agreement on this now, he couldn't continue to do the job. He couldn't. Electing him to another 4 years, he clearly was not in a place where physically and mentally he could handle the job anymore. He should have stepped out. That's the right decision for Joe Biden. That's the right decision for the Democratic Party. And it's the right decision for America in that it gives voters a better set of choices on the ballot.
Yeah. And I also think the age thing and how Republicans handle the age thing, you talked about, sort of Democrats in the media who've, not covered up, but certainly pushed back on the idea that Biden wasn't capable of doing this job anymore. I'm interested to see if conservative folks now maybe pay a little bit of attention to their own candidate and how old he is and how the crazy stuff he says. I will tell you, Rob, I mean, this is probably not going to land particularly well. I watched Kamala Harris's rally yesterday in Wisconsin. I was so excited by the fact she started a sentence and ended a sentence, and I knew what she was saying.
Yeah.
Right? That hasn't happened in presidential politics for a little bit. I mean, it's like I knew what she was talking about. She made sense. The words she said were in the right order, and she made sense.
We are setting the bar so low for our national leaders. I mean, at this point, it's like that they're coherent and that they'll leave office when their term's over, right? I mean, these are not hard bars to get over, right? I feel like it's a monarchy. Like, which of the king's children should rule us next? Well, how about the coherent one who's not going to murder a bunch of people? Like, I mean, I just feel like we're setting the bar so damn low for this. It's ridiculous, and it's depressing in its own right. But I mean, listen, Kamala Harris is going to govern way too far to the left for me. She really is, and I don't like that she's kind of avoiding Prime Minister Netanyahu. She said some things about the Gaza-Israeli conflict that really put a pit in my stomach. Her voting record in the United States Senate, I don't think is friendly to North Dakota's industrial interests in our economy. I think there are a lot of tough things about it, but she can finish sentences and she'll leave at the end of her term if she's not elected. This is where I'm at. This is how pathetic it is.
So I will tell you, again, I'm going to go back to enthusiasm because I'm like, somebody asked me, I think it was Monday, somebody said, it feels like, they said, do you think this is like Barack Obama? And I was like, listen, it's been 24 to 48 hours. Let's calm down a little bit about this. But now watching the enthusiasm and just like talking to people who are just like, oh my God, I gave to Kamala Harris. I've never given money to Democrats before, but I'm just so excited that we have a different option.
If I were you guys, I would be in pump the brakes mode. I mean, you are in danger of setting an unattainable standard for this person.
Sure.
Right. It's like when you call up a prospect and it's like they're the next Derek Jeter.
Yeah.
That's not really fair, right? Like they've hit 30.
They've hit 30
not bad. Right. Okay. All right. Kamala Harris, comparing her to Barack Obama at this point, I think is unfair. How about just let her be Kamala Harris?
I think the point that was trying to be made was not that she is Barack Obama. The enthusiasm around this felt like Barack.
I think a lot of that is circumstance.
For sure. For sure.
So it is so, well, it's never happened before that a sitting president who is eligible for re-election opted not to run this late in the game.
Right.
I mean, it's happened. I mean, them opting not to run has happened before. LBJ, the obvious example, but I mean, this late in the election cycle and this sort of dramatic where they're opting not to run just because it's so clear to everybody in the country that this person is not. Do you think though? I kind of wish he would also resign. Because one of the problems is you're saying he doesn't have the competency to the next 4 years. Does he have the competency? We still need a president until January.
Yeah. No, I don't think he should resign. I mean, I think that what it looks like in 4 years is different than what it looks like today. I think he can still do the job. I think he's, will surround himself with people who can make the right decisions. And so, I mean, I don't understand how Republicans can be saying, essentially Kamala Harris is a DEI pick to be vice president, but for God's sakes, let's make her the president right now. I mean, the hypocrisy is high with a lot of this.
Although I would know, I am not being a hypocrite about this. And I think the DEI stuff about that she's a diversity pick or an affirmative action pick or what have you, I think is absurd and ridiculous. She was a United States senator. She won a statewide election in California. Previously, I mean, she served in office. Again, I'm not a big fan of her policies. I'm not going to enjoy a Kamala Harris administration. But I mean, she's as qualified for the job as a lot of people who've run for it. So I mean, if you don't want her to be elected president, attack her policies, attack the things she's done in office.
Frankly, that's one of the frustrations I've seen with some of these guys going after her for being a DEI pick and, using the race stuff. It's gotten to the point where if you're a woman or if you're a person of color and you're in one of these positions and you're not a Republican, you obviously only got there because of DEI. That's essentially what some of the yahoos in the GOP House caucus are saying, and it pisses me.
And frankly, though, the sexism is not... I remember what a lot of people were saying about Sarah Palin when she first popped onto the scene. I know a lot of people... I watched during the Bush years what a lot of people were saying about Republican figures like Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, that they were... and this is horrible things to say, but Aunt Jemimas and Uncle Toms and all just horrible stuff from the left. So, unfortunately, that sort of racism and misogyny is not unique to Republicans. But it is interesting. VP pick. I'm hearing everybody's telling me Josh Shapiro should be it.
It's really interesting that
he can deliver Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is more important than Arizona. Because Senator Mark Kelly's kind of the one that I'm interested in.
It's really interesting seeing in the sort of left. You're reading about coups on the right. I'm seeing sort of the the dumping of Oppo research on some of these candidates. I mean, I've seen stories about Josh Shapiro is not good on public education because he supported a voucher bill at one point. Mark Kelly's terrible on unions because he didn't sign on to the PRO Act when he was up for re-election. And that was a political calculus, right? So therefore he's bad on unions. People are sort of dumping the Oppo books here to try to influence this. I mean, last time I think we talked about this on Monday, I said Shapiro or Kelly. I think Walz is now in play because he's had some really good appearances on cable news in a good way. I love Tim Walz. I still think just you need electoral votes. Shapiro or Kelly make the most sense. And you can't win without Pennsylvania, right? I mean,
also, I think it may be time for Democrats that the appeal of this vice president, it shouldn't be how appealing they are to the Democratic base. It should be how appealing they are to the broader American electorate, which is what you want to win. I mean, Kamala Harris has the endorsement sewn up. It's hers, right?
Right.
She has, I think she needs to make a VP pick that broadens her appeal, and having somebody on the ticket who isn't immediately hostile to something like school choice, or isn't immediately hostile to, the idea that labor unions can get a little carried away or what have you. I don't know that these are weaknesses, I guess.
But I guess one of the things I'm saying is seeing the interest groups sort of floating out their concerns on these people. There's just lots of angling going on. I mean, I saw some stuff about Andy Beshear. He was standing on picket lines when these other guys were not getting on board with the PRO Act, that kind of thing. Another thing that I've heard that I kind of like, and I don't think this will happen, though, is Gretchen Whitmer getting on the ticket and going all in on the female ticket. I think that might be a bridge too far. I also think that, I think sometimes Gretchen Whitmer likely sees herself as a president more than a vice president at this point in her career. So that might be a little bit difficult. But I'm pumped for this VP pick and to figure out where it lands.
Can I float something that so Aaron Sorkin, obviously the creator of West Wing, is trying to maybe use some public clout to turn reality into an episode of the West Wing, and is sort of advocated for like appointing Mitt Romney or a Republican. There is a part of me, and I don't know that Mitt Romney's the pick, because I really like Mitt Romney. He's really old though at this. I think he's 78 now. So if we're having a problem with people who are too old, I think we got to go younger. Part of me wonders, when you look at the galaxy of people who have served in Trump's administration and are now not endorsing him or saying this is a mistake, it's a terrible idea. What if you pick somebody like that?
So I love that idea. I mean, if the number one goal for Democrats is to beat Donald Trump and make sure he's not the president again, that's a play that can work. I mean, who better to articulate why this guy should not be president than somebody who saw him firsthand and said, this guy should not be president.
When I was in the Oval Office with Donald Trump,
right?
Right, all the stories that they could tell. Now, I know the problem is who, right? I mean, it's a good idea on paper, picking an actual name and understanding that they're going to have problems or maybe things in their background that won't be so good. That becomes more complicated. But to me, that's the idea is, I mean, if the argument is that Donald Trump is a threat to the Republic, and I think sometimes Democrats do go a little overboard, but I think Donald Trump is a roll of the dice, and I don't want to roll the dice. So if we want to keep in that theme, you which is part of what I was pushing back on some of the Oppo stuff that you were talking about. This can't be, I mean, it has to be for America, right? Like if that's going to be your theme, then your choices have to redound to, we're here to serve America, even to the point where Kamala, I think, could maybe distance herself from some of her past positions and even say, listen, I have an ideology, I'm from California, I'm a liberal Democrat, but I understand that there's something larger at play right now.
Yeah, it'd be really great if there's a military type too that basically would come in and articulate the importance of this for the country.
Like Mad Dog Mattis or something like that, right?
I don't think anybody named Mad Dog should be part of this, but yeah.
Hey. I'm a Mattis fan.
You're pro Mad Dog. No, I don't know, and I'm trying to think of somebody floated a former general, and I can't remember who it was on cable news the other
like Miley or something like that.
McCracken, maybe. I don't remember. I'm not a foreign policy guy, so yeah. But I think that idea would be wonderful, and I think it'd be a great way to bring the country together.
I really do. I think it could work because, again, I think if Democrats make this about picking somebody, stop the fun, and we got to go here. But the fundamental problem, I think, in American politics today is that we spend so much time pandering to the base, which I think to your argument, you said like nobody's persuadable anymore, and it's all about turnout. And my rebuttal to that is if we keep playing the game that way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. At some point, somebody has to reach aside and say, I'm going to appeal to something larger than just the base of my party.
And it's hard to like sort of strategically change what you're doing 104 days before the election, right?
It is, but it is such a unique moment. I feel like there's an opening for it. But again, I have nothing at stake in this other than the fact that, I'm not a political consultant. I'm not the candidate. I don't, win or lose, I still have my job. So
you're just calling balls and strikes.
That's what I'm trying to do. All right, we got our
Angel Hernandez of North Dakota politics.
That is, for people who are baseball fans, you understand that was not a compliment. All right, so coming up on Friday, I had teased this a little bit in the Monday show. Rebecca Binstock from the Ethics Commission. She has a letter to the editor of the paper too, where they're asking for people to serve on the Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission gets talked about a lot. A lot of people don't like it. They don't like the way it was designed. I think there's still a bad taste in their mouths from the way it became into existence. But I do think there's some ways that we could use it for some fruitful things. So she's going to kind of talk about, what the Ethics Commission is. Obviously, they have an opening. What does service on the Ethics Commission look like? People listening to this who might be interested, we're going to talk about all that on Friday. So be sure to tune in, download. Also, if you would leave ratings and reviews and stuff for the podcast, that would be super awesome. Wherever you listen to this at, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. By the way, we're on YouTube too. I don't know a lot of people, I've never really mentioned this. Apparently a lot of people like to listen to their podcasts on YouTube. The audio version of this show, though, you're not going to see Chad and I on video, and trust me, you don't really want to anyway.
Whoa.
Okay, Chad is a damn handsome man. You don't want to see me on this. But my point is, we are on YouTube. So if you search for Plain Talk on YouTube, you can find us there. If that's your thing, listening to the show on YouTube, you can find us there as well. Any way you want to listen. But if you do find us, do likes, do reviews, all that fun stuff. That really helps the show reach a larger audience, which our audience is growing all the time. So that's also super cool. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again.